Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our studies of Second Kings. Today we're in Second Kings chapter 8, and as we mentioned in our reading of the text, this is not one lengthy account, but rather it's several short ones that are kind of put together just to give us a few short pictures. So, what are some of the things that we can learn or that we can see from this particular chapter? I want us to begin in the first section of the chapter where we see Elisha's interaction with the Shunammite woman. Now, we have seen this Shunammite woman a couple of times previously in the book of Second Kings. But here in chapter 8, we see that Elisha is going to warn her about a coming famine for the land, and that this famine is going to last for a while, and that she and her family need to go somewhere else. He doesn't tell them exactly where, but they need to go somewhere else for the next while. And we see here an instance of what it's like to have favors and friends, if you want to call it that, in the fact that Elisha most assuredly went and found the Shunammite woman to tell her. He has had a relationship with this family for decades at this point, and they have been ones who have been among the very few who have been close to Elisha in all of this. And you see that Elisha takes his relationship with this family very seriously. He is striving to help them. He goes out of his way to take care of them on numerous occasions over the course of his life. We see how important those friends are to Elisha. As a matter of fact, when they return 7 years later from the land of the Philistines, after the famine is over, Gehazi, who is the servant of Elisha, is going to go to the king and make sure that the family receives back their land. And the king is actually going to give them their land plus whatever the yield would have been for their land while they were gone. But you have here the level of friendship that Elisha has with this family, but also his desire to take care of them and to watch out for them in the midst of very trying and difficult circumstances. Now, he can't do everything for them, and he's not going to go with them. He's not going to make sure that every bed is snugly secured and that kind of thing. But he is going to make sure that they have what they need in order to be able to make the right choices that will keep them safe and that will help to keep them in a good condition. And so we see this friendship that has developed. And the fact of the matter is, when you are a person who is in Elisha's situation, friends are very hard to come by. Those who you can trust, those who are going to look out for you and actually going to care about you, are ones that are few and far between in Elisha's line of work. And so you see how important this family is to Elisha by some of these things that transpire. As you drop down a little bit further, you have in the second area of 2 Kings 8, you have Elisha in Syria. And he is in Damascus, where Ben-Hadad is the king of Syria. Now, Ben-Hadad has become sick. And so Ben-Hadad is going to send Hazael, who is one of his trusted advisors, and he's going to send Hazael to Elisha to determine whether or not he's going to get better. And so Hazael's going to come, and Elisha is basically going to tell him, yes, he's going to recover from his illness. His illness in and of itself is not life-threatening, but he's not going to recover. Now, that sounds strange to us, and it certainly sounds as though Elisha is talking out of both sides of his mouth. He says, tell him he's going to recover, but I'm going to tell you he's not going to recover. So did he just lie? Well, no, he didn't. As a matter of fact, he is instead prophesying what is going to take place. Because when word gets back to Ben-Hadad that he is going to recover, Hazael decides to take matters into his own hands, and he's going to smother the king to death in his sleep and take over the throne. And so you have this situation where it's not going to be the illness that is going to kill the king. Hazael is going to do it. And so in that sense, Elisha's prophecy is fulfilled. The king would have recovered from his sickness, but he didn't recover because of the actions of Hazael. And so you have here this situation where Elisha is going to tell things as they are without going into all of the details of what it is that is going to happen. Sometimes you're going to have these very specific details, and sometimes it's going to be given in such a way that it is almost a mystery across the board. It's almost a code of God knows what's going on, but he's not going to tell you every little detail. And so you have here Elisha's prophecy, and Hazael is going to become the king of Syria. In the latter sections, we have a series of kings that are going to be discussed in Judah. Now, where this becomes interesting is their connection to the kings of Israel. Remember that Israel and Judah have broken off from each other. They have long been enemies of each other in most circumstances. And yet you have a situation now where the descendants of one of the kings of Israel is going to basically be the ruling family in the kingdom of Judah. And so while you have these two situations, and I will thoroughly admit that there are some confusing interactions between the names of the kings at this time, because you have two Jorams that are ruling, one in Israel and one in Judah. So they call the one in the southern kingdom Jehoram instead of Joram. And then at the end of his life, in the account in 2 Kings chapter 8, they go back to calling him Joram again. And so you have this confusion that evolves sometimes from that. But I want you to notice the influence of one family. Here you have specifically the influence of Ahab's family. We've looked at all of the different things that happened with Ahab and Jezebel and all of those things at the end of 1 Kings. But now you have Ahab's family continuing to have this significant influence over the people in Judah, even though they're not in Israel, because Ahab and Jezebel's daughter is going to marry Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah's son. And so she is going to be the one who is going to have a prominent influence in the things that happen in Judah. And given her mother's influence in Israel, it is not hard to recognize that that influence is not going to be one that is going to turn hearts and minds toward God. You see, we need to understand that there can be those families, and we can have families that can have a very strong influence, and it can last for generations. The question is, will it be an influence for good, or will it be an influence for evil? Here in Ahab and Jezebel's case, that influence that extends down through the generations will not be for good. These are some of the things that I found here in 2 Kings chapter 8. I hope they're beneficial to you. When we come back next time, we will begin looking at 2 Kings chapter 9. But until then, have a great day.